Hello everyone. I hope you enjoy listening to the story. My name is Olivia Blackwell. I am 32-year-old. At 5:11 a.m., my husband's bodyguard knocked on my door and said, "Ma'am, your husband is about to report you missing. You need to disappear first." I stood frozen in the doorway of our Greenwich mansion, still wearing my silk robe, my pulse hammering so hard I could hear it inside my ears. Marcus Hale had worked security for my family since I was 16 years old, and in all that time, I had never seen fear in his eyes until that morning. Rainwater dripped from the shoulders of his black coat onto the marble floor while he glanced over. His shoulder like someone was watching the house from the darkness. "We do not have much time," he whispered. "Ethan already prepared the report. By noon, the police will believe you vanished during a mental breakdown." I almost laughed because the entire thing sounded insane. My husband was in Zurich for a technology summit. At least that was what he told me before kissing my forehead 2 nights earlier and promising he would bring me back Swiss chocolate like he always did after business trips. But Marcus reached into his coat and handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a printed copy of a missing persons report with my name already signed across the bottom. My throat tightened. The date on the form was today.
I looked up at him, confused and angry. What is this supposed to mean?
Marcus stepped inside and locked the front door behind him. "It means your husband is not in Zurich. He landed in New York 3 hours ago with Vanessa Cole." My stomach twisted so violently I had to grip the kitchen counter. Vanessa was Ethan's new media consultant. A 24-year-old influencer with glossy blonde hair and a fake innocent smile that made my skin crawl from the moment I met her. Ethan called her ambitious. I called her dangerous. Marcus pulled another paper from the envelope. It was a private jet manifest with Ethan and Vanessa listed together. Then came a board meeting schedule for 9 o'clock that morning. Emergency restructuring vote. Acting chairman appointment. My hands began shaking. Suddenly every strange thing from the past 6 months rushed back into my head at once. Ethan asking me to sign revised shareholder documents without reading them carefully. My phone randomly resetting in the middle of the night. The cameras outside our bedroom going offline for maintenance. Even my longtime assistant being quietly replaced by someone loyal to Ethan. Marcus lowered his voice again. "Your father knew this man could not be trusted. He told me if anything happened, I was to protect you first." My chest tightened at the mention of my father. He died 2 years earlier, leaving Ethan in control of the public side of Blackwell Dynamics, while I handled the legal structure behind the scenes. Marcus slid a cheap burner phone across the kitchen table and stared directly into my eyes. From this moment on, Olivia Blackwell is officially dead. The drive to Boston felt endless. Rain slammed against the windshield while Marcus kept both hands tight on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch beneath his skin every time headlights appeared behind us. I sat in silence with the burner phone in my lap, staring at the reflection of my own face in the dark window. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. 12 hours earlier, I had been Olivia Blackwell, wife of one of the most admired billionaires in America. By sunrise, I was apparently unstable, missing, and slowly being erased from my own life. The safe house turned out to be an old lake house outside Boston that belonged to my father before he died. The wood floors creaked beneath our feet as Marcus unlocked the front door. Dust floated through the pale morning light. Everything smelled like cedar and old paper. It felt less like a home and more like a grave someone forgot to bury. Marcus immediately covered the windows while I turned on the television in the living room. The moment the screen flickered to life, my stomach dropped. My face filled every news channel. Philanthropist and Blackwell Dynamics co-founder Olivia Blackwell has reportedly disappeared after showing signs of emotional distress. The anchor announced with fake sympathy dripping from her voice. Then Ethan appeared on the screen wearing a charcoal suit and the exact expression he used at charity galas whenever he wanted the world to see him as compassionate. His eyes looked red, almost wet. "My wife has been struggling privately for some time," he said softly. "Right now my only concern is bringing Olivia home safely." I nearly threw the remote through the television. That man had once held me while I cried after my father's funeral. I built an empire beside him from a cramped office with peeling wallpaper and broken air conditioning. I spent 14 years believing his hand was the safest place in the world. Now he was weaponizing my entire life against me on live television. The next report was worse. A female reporter claimed sources close to the family described me as emotionally fragile and increasingly paranoid over the last year. Ethan had already planted the narrative: the unstable wife, the exhausted woman who finally snapped. My chest tightened as images flashed across the screen of me leaving charity events looking tired after 16-hour workdays. They cropped the photos perfectly to make me appear hollow and erratic. "This is psychological conditioning," Marcus said quietly from the kitchen doorway. "He wants the public to accept your disappearance before it officially happens." I looked at him. "Officially happens?" Marcus walked toward me and placed a stack of documents on the coffee table. "Your husband intends to make your death believable enough that nobody asks questions when your voting shares transfer to him." I flipped through the papers with trembling fingers. Corporate restructuring drafts. Emergency authority transfers. Offshore holding companies I had never seen before. Then one sentence made my blood run cold. Temporary incapacitation clause. I suddenly remembered the night Ethan convinced me to sign updated shareholder paperwork after a fundraising gala in Manhattan. I had been exhausted. He kissed my temple and said it was routine legal maintenance. I signed without reading carefully because I trusted him more than I trusted myself. God, I was such a fool. Marcus sat across from me, his expression grim. "Your father funded Blackwell Dynamics from the beginning," he said. "Not Ethan. Your father believed Ethan had charisma, but he never believed he had integrity." My hands froze over the documents. "Then why did he let him run the company?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "Because you loved him." That answer hurt more than anything else. Hours later, I logged into an old cloud account Ethan forgot existed. At first I found nothing except archived business files and travel receipts. Then I opened a deleted folder labeled V. Inside were dozens of videos. The first clip showed Vanessa standing barefoot in my penthouse kitchen, drinking champagne from one of my crystal glasses while Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist. She laughed into the camera. "Once she disappears, I get the penthouse and the ring." Ethan kissed her shoulder and replied, 30 days. Then everything becomes ours." I stopped breathing for a second. My fingers went numb around the laptop. Vanessa was not some temporary affair. They had been planning my replacement like a corporate merger. I watched another video, then another. Expensive vacations, hidden apartments, conversations about board control. Ethan once joked that grieving widowers always received positive press coverage. My stomach twisted so violently I had to run to the bathroom before I got sick. When I came back out, Marcus was waiting silently beside the fireplace. "There is something else you need to know," he said. He opened a locked drawer beneath an old bookshelf and pulled out a thick red folder. "Ethan did not invent this game with you." I frowned. "What does that mean?" Marcus handed me the file. Inside were photographs of women I had never seen before. Marriage licenses, settlement agreements, private investigator reports. One photo showed a brunette woman smiling beside Ethan nearly 10 years earlier. Another showed her leaving a courthouse in tears. "Who are these women?" I whispered. Marcus looked at me with quiet pity. "Collateral damage." Then I noticed the title stamped across the front page in black ink. Project Second Wife. I stared at the red folder for so long that the letters on the cover began to blur together. Project Second Wife. The words felt filthy in my hands, like touching the skin of something dead. Marcus quietly placed a glass of whiskey beside me before walking toward the window to check the road outside again. He moved like a soldier expecting bullets at any moment. Meanwhile, I sat frozen on the couch, flipping through page after page of carefully organized destruction. Ethan had done this before. Not once, multiple times. Every woman inside that file had something valuable when he met her. Family money, real estate, political connections. One woman owned pharmaceutical patents worth millions. Another came from a banking dynasty in Chicago. Ethan seduced them, married them, slowly isolated them, then pushed them out of their own lives while making himself look innocent. Some signed settlements. Some disappeared quietly from public view. One woman supposedly drowned off the Amalfi Coast during a solo vacation after threatening to sue him for fraud. The investigation ruled it accidental. But the more I read, the more my hands began shaking with rage. "You knew about this?" I finally asked. Marcus nodded once. Your father suspected it years ago. He hired investigators after Ethan pressured your previous assistant into deleting financial records. My chest tightened painfully. Then why did nobody tell me? Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since arriving at my door. Because your father believed you would never leave him unless you saw the truth yourself. I laughed bitterly at that. The sound echoed through the empty lake house like broken glass. Ethan had spent 14 years studying me the way predators study prey. He knew exactly how to manipulate my loyalty. Every time I questioned him, he turned it into concern for my stress levels. Every argument ended with him pulling me into his arms and convincing me I was overworked, emotional, exhausted. God, the warning signs had been everywhere. I just painted over them with love. That night, sleep never came. I sat at the dining table surrounded by legal documents while rain hammered the roof overhead. At 3 a.m, Marcus brought me coffee and silently slid another folder across the table. This one contained records from Blackwell Dynamics itself. My stomach dropped as I scanned the transactions. Ethan had already begun liquidating assets behind the board's back. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Hidden transfers totaling nearly $480 million. Fraudulent consulting contracts tied directly to Vanessa. It was not just betrayal anymore. It was corporate theft on a scale that could destroy thousands of employees if the company collapsed. He is planning to disappear with the money after the merger, I whispered. Marcus nodded grimly. And once you are legally declared incompetent or dead, nobody can stop him. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. Something cold settled inside me then. The grief was still there, buried beneath my ribs like shattered glass, but rage was beginning to overpower it. The next morning, Ethan appeared on television again. This time he stood outside Blackwell Dynamics headquarters, surrounded by cameras, pretending to be the devastated husband desperately searching for his missing wife. Olivia dedicated her life to this company, he said emotionally. Right now I just want her safe. Behind him, I noticed Vanessa stepping out of a black SUV, wearing oversized sunglasses and one of my old cashmere coats. My pulse exploded. That coat belonged to me. I remembered buying it in Milan during our 10th anniversary trip while Ethan kissed my neck and promised we would grow old together. Vanessa paused for the photographers long enough for them to capture the image perfectly. The grieving executive supporting her heartbroken lover. I suddenly understood everything. Ethan was not just stealing my company. He was rewriting the public story of our marriage in real time. Hours later, Vanessa started live streaming from my penthouse apartment. I watched the video on mute at first because the sight alone made me sick. She wandered through my dressing room with a glass of champagne in her hand, while thousands of followers flooded the comments with heart emojis. Then she held up a diamond ring so massive it sparkled beneath the camera lights like a weapon. Some women are too weak to keep powerful men, she giggled. But I guess everything happens for a reason. My vision blurred red. For one dangerous second, I wanted to drive back to Manhattan and rip that ring off her finger myself. Marcus must have seen the fury on my face because he quietly took the phone from my hand and lowered it onto the table. That is exactly what Ethan wants, he said calmly. He wants you emotional, reckless, visible. I stood there breathing hard while my nails dug crescent moons into my palms. Then something unexpected happened. I smiled. Marcus frowned slightly. What? I looked up at him with the first real clarity I had felt in days. They think I am cornered, I said softly. They think the story is already finished. I walked toward the fireplace and stared into the flames dancing behind the glass. Ethan believed he controlled the narrative because he controlled the cameras, the lawyers, and the headlines. But he forgot one thing. I built the legal foundation underneath his entire empire. I knew every loophole, every hidden clause, every vulnerability buried beneath those skyscrapers with our name attached to them. My father always used to say that the most dangerous people in the world were not the loud ones. They were the patient ones, the people willing to let their enemies celebrate too early. That evening, my lawyer finally arrived at the lake house carrying encrypted hard drives and emergency trust documents my father left behind before he died. We spent hours preparing the counterattack. Not just a lawsuit, a public execution. I recorded a video message myself wearing the white silk dress Ethan bought me on our wedding anniversary 3 years earlier. I looked directly into the camera and spoke slowly, so every word landed like a knife. If you are watching this, my husband already tried to bury me alive. Even Marcus looked unsettled after hearing it. Good. I wanted Ethan terrified. Not of prison. Of me. Near midnight, my lawyer suddenly looked up from his laptop, his face pale beneath the glow of the screen. Olivia, he said carefully. Ethan just filed emergency paperwork to have you legally declared mentally incompetent. 3 days later, Manhattan glittered beneath the night sky like nothing had happened. The Plaza Hotel blazed with golden lights while luxury cars lined the entrance and photographers crowded behind velvet ropes waiting to capture America's newest power couple. Ethan Blackwell and Vanessa Cole were hosting their engagement gala less than 2 weeks after my disappearance. That alone told me everything I needed to know about how untouchable Ethan believed himself to be. The ballroom overflowed with hedge fund managers, politicians, celebrities, and board members from Blackwell Dynamics. Crystal chandeliers hung above them like frozen waterfalls, while servers carried trays of champagne through the crowd. Every television network in the country was covering the event live because Ethan had carefully framed it as a celebration of resilience after personal tragedy. According to the media, he was the grieving billionaire somehow finding the strength to move forward after his mentally unstable wife vanished. I watched the live stream from a black SUV parked across the street, my fingers wrapped tightly around the burner phone while Marcus sat beside me in silence. Vanessa descended the ballroom staircase in a silver gown covered in diamonds, pausing every few steps for photographers like she had rehearsed it for weeks. The engagement ring on her finger flashed beneath the lights, so brightly it almost looked artificial. Ethan stood at the bottom waiting for her with the same charming smile that once convinced me he was incapable of cruelty. Looking at him now felt surreal. How had I ever mistaken manipulation for love? He kissed Vanessa's hand dramatically while reporters applauded. Then he turned toward the cameras with carefully rehearsed sadness in his eyes. Olivia always believed in protecting this company, he said into the microphone. Even during her personal struggles, she wanted Blackwell Dynamics to survive. Tonight is about honoring resilience and beginning a hopeful new chapter. The audience erupted into applause. My stomach twisted in disgust. He was burying me publicly while standing beneath chandeliers worth more than most people's homes. Inside the ballroom, attorneys from Blackwell Dynamics prepared final documents transferring temporary controlling authority entirely to Ethan due to my presumed mental incompetence and disappearance. Once signed, he would control every major decision inside the company. The offshore accounts were already loaded. The merger with the foreign investment group was scheduled for the following week. By the time authorities discovered the missing money, Ethan and Vanessa would be untouchable somewhere outside the United States. Marcus glanced at me. "This is your last chance to walk away," he said quietly. I looked back at the hotel entrance where Ethan stood laughing with investors. "No," I replied coldly. "This is his last chance." At exactly 9:17 p.m., the ballroom lights suddenly flickered. Guests looked around in confusion as the orchestra stopped playing mid-song. Ethan frowned toward the ceiling while one of his assistants rushed toward the technical booth. Then the giant LED screens surrounding the ballroom turned black. A second later, my face appeared across every screen in the room. The silence that followed felt almost supernatural. Hundreds of people froze in place. Champagne glasses stopped halfway to lips. Vanessa's smile collapsed instantly. I stared directly into the camera, wearing the white silk dress Ethan bought me on our anniversary. "Good evening," I said calmly. "If you are watching this, my husband already tried to bury me alive." Gasps rippled across the ballroom like a shockwave. Ethan's face drained of color. "Turn it off," he snapped at the staff. "Turn it off now." But it was too late. The video continued playing across every screen in the building. Financial records appeared next. Cayman Island shell corporations, hidden wire transfers, forged shareholder authorizations. Then came private recordings of Ethan discussing my disappearance with Vanessa over dinner. "Once she is legally gone, nobody can challenge the board," Ethan said casually in the clip while sipping wine. Vanessa laughed softly beside him. "I still cannot believe she trusted you for this long." Another clip played showing Ethan instructing lawyers to establish a psychiatric narrative around me weeks before I vanished. Every lie, every setup, every betrayal exploded into public view all at once. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Investors began shouting at one another, while reporters scrambled to record every second. Several board members stormed away from Ethan immediately. One elderly investor actually tore off his event badge and threw it directly at Ethan's chest. Vanessa looked like she might faint. "Ethan, do something," she whispered frantically while grabbing his arm. But for the first time since I met him, Ethan Blackwell looked powerless. Real fear had finally reached his eyes. Then the final recording played. Ethan stood inside his office speaking to a private investigator. By the time Olivia realizes what is happening, she will already be invisible. The screen froze on his smiling face. That was when the ballroom doors opened. Every head in the room turned toward me as I stepped inside beneath the glow of the chandeliers. The silence became absolute. Vanessa physically stumbled backward when she saw me walking toward the center of the ballroom alive and perfectly composed. Ethan stared at me like he was seeing a ghost rise from its grave. I wore a white gown with no jewelry except my father's watch around my wrist. Calm, cold, untouchable. Camera flashes exploded across the room as reporters nearly trampled one another trying to get closer. I stopped only a few feet away from Ethan and looked directly into his terrified eyes. "Surprised to see me?" I asked softly. Before he could answer, another wave of panic spread through the room as federal agents entered from every entrance of the ballroom. Dark jackets, badges, earpieces. The lead FBI agent walked straight toward Ethan holding a thick stack of warrants in his hand. "Ethan Blackwell," he announced loudly. "You are under investigation for financial fraud, conspiracy, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and attempted unlawful asset seizure." Vanessa burst into tears instantly. Ethan stepped backward in disbelief. "This is insane," he snapped. "She is lying. She is mentally unstable." I almost smiled at how predictable he sounded. Then I raised my phone and pressed play on one final recording. My father's voice filled the ballroom speakers. "If this file has been released, it means Ethan finally betrayed my daughter exactly as I warned he would." Ethan's knees nearly buckled. The FBI agents moved forward immediately and locked handcuffs around his wrists while cameras flashed nonstop around us. Investors turned away from him in disgust. Vanessa covered her face as reporters shouted questions from every direction. I stepped closer until only Ethan could hear my next words. "You should have divorced me," I whispered. "Trying to erase me was your fatal mistake." As agents dragged him past me toward the ballroom exit, Ethan suddenly turned his head and spoke one sentence that made my blood run cold. "Your father was never the real founder either." Tiếp tục phần 5, bám sát dàn ý tóm tắt, yêu cầu viết đoạn văn liền mạch, viết đúng 500 từ đã yêu cầu, hạn chế xuống dòng vùn. Viết đúng chính tả tiếng Anh Mỹ, ngắt nghỉ đúng nhịp dòng đọc. A month later, Ethan Blackwell sat inside a federal detention center awaiting trial, while every business magazine in America picked apart the collapse of his empire piece by piece. Vanessa disappeared from social media entirely after paparazzi photographed her leaving a Manhattan apartment carrying suitcases and crying beneath a hoodie. Blackwell Dynamics survived, barely, but only because the board voted unanimously to return full executive control to me after the scandal detonated across every major news network. Reporters now called me the billionaire wife who came back from the dead. I hated that title more than I could explain. They still did not understand the worst part of what happened. The affair was painful, yes. The theft was unforgivable. But the true horror came from realizing someone you loved had slowly been trying to erase your existence long before you noticed the knife in your back. Ethan did not just want my company. He wanted the world to forget I ever mattered. Some nights I still woke up shaking from dreams about that morning at 5:11 a.m. I would hear Marcus knocking on the door again, hear his voice warning me to disappear before my husband made me vanish forever. The human mind can survive heartbreak. What it struggles to survive is replacement. Watching another woman wear my clothes, sleep in my home, stand beside cameras while my name was rewritten into a story about instability and weakness almost destroyed something inside me. I spent years believing betrayal begins with cheating. I know better now. Betrayal begins the moment someone decides your existence has become inconvenient to their ambition. A few weeks after Ethan's arrest, I finally opened the private vault my father left hidden beneath the Boston Lake house. Inside were old contracts, faded photographs, handwritten journals, and encrypted hard drives dating back over 30 years. Marcus stood silently beside me while I sorted through the documents late into the night. Then I found something that made my stomach tighten. Blackwell Dynamics was never truly founded by my father. The original infrastructure belonged to another company that disappeared during a hostile acquisition decades earlier. Entire patents had been transferred under sealed agreements tied to men I had never heard of before. Ethan's final words at the gala suddenly echoed through my head again. Your father was never the real founder either. I stood alone on the rooftop terrace of the Manhattan headquarters one cold evening, staring down at the city glowing beneath me like scattered gold. The wind cut through my coat while traffic hummed far below the skyscrapers. Everything Ethan tried to steal was still mine. The company, the power, the name. But somehow I felt less certain about my own life than ever before. My phone buzzed in my pocket just as the sun disappeared behind the skyline. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. A man's voice spoke immediately. Calm. Older. Dangerous. Ms. Blackwell, he said quietly. Your father hid much more than money. And if you want the truth about who really built this empire, do not trust anyone around you. Then the line went dead. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are not the loud ones. They are the quiet lies hidden behind kisses, promises, shared bank accounts, and years of trust. Ethan did not destroy his own life because he cheated. He destroyed it the moment he believed he could manipulate reality itself and erase another human being without consequences. Power built on deception always collapses eventually, because the truth has a way of surviving even when people try to bury it alive. I learned that love without honesty becomes a weapon, and blind trust can turn even the strongest person into an easy target. Never ignore red flags just because someone looks successful, charming, or powerful. Protect your name, your finances, and your voice before someone else tries to take them from you. If this story shocked you, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment below telling me honestly. If someone tried to erase your entire life, would you forgive them or destroy everything they built?